Did Eric Dressen, the guy who the salad grind is pretty much named after, really invent the trick? There is another pro from the 80s who is claiming it as well, but who's right? If you like deep dives into nerdy skateboarding topics, hit the subscribe button. Helps out the channel, lets me know that this is the kind of stuff that you like. Before we get too deep into it, let's take a second and define the salad grind. These days, it's just a 5-0 that's tilted until it's almost a blunt slide. You can do front salads, back salads, even frontside blunts.
Front salad, back salad, front blunt. But
that's not how it was back in the day, especially with tricks named after people. Like Mike Smith invented the Smith, but he did it frontside. Monty Nolder was the first guy to do it backside, and old vert pros call that the Monty grind. You can check out a very thorough video on that topic right there, where I talk about where that comes from. Even though the term backside Smith was being used in the 80s. But anyway, in this particular case, we're talking about the front side salad grind. That is the one that was supposedly invented by Dressen. He was inspired by Omar Hassan, who did them backside. He said that he used to slide along backside. He would do it to slow down so that he could be better prepared for the next wall. But we have two stories to investigate here. The canonical Eric Dressen version of the story goes like this, and you can watch him tell it on the 9 Club in his own words, but I'm going to summarize it for you here. Around 87 or 88, he saw Omar Hassan doing the backside version and just kind of messing around. He tried it frontside, didn't take the trick too seriously, and as a joke, he called it the windshield wiper because the board would kind of rotate out and then back in. And he got, it wasn't something that he took too seriously, but he practiced it more, got to do it further and further, and eventually had a picture taken, which was published in Thrasher. And the publisher, Kevin Thatcher, captioned it Salad Grind, which is just a brilliant name for the trick. Eric Dressen, Salad Dressen, perfect name for that trick. And that is what was published in Thrasher. As for what issue that was, I'm not entirely sure. I will get into that more in the future. But I believe this is the picture. When being talked to by interviewers from Santa Cruz, they show this picture. The 9 Club has this one in their thumbnail, and I also found this third one. This is not the best example of the trick, but we'll take any extra evidence we can get our hands on. In 1989, Santa Cruz Wheels put out Speed Freaks, which is the first ever video part that Dressen ever had. He was the #1 ranked street skater in the world at that time, and his part is really good. Back in the day, they would shoot it over 3 days or so, but he's doing all kinds of stuff. He's tearing up this school, does a tail slide on a bench. He is wall riding all over the place, and he does a salad grind, and it is a solid one. The board is tweaked about as far as it can get before it would slip into a blunt. It's perfect. It's a great trick, a legendary skater, and it is a good story, and it's all seemingly completely true. But there is another competing story. Friend of the show, Dan McFarland from Houston Skateboard, sent me this post, and it is Ben Schroeder, who is a legendary pro skater turned skate park designer whose career stretches back into the 1980s. And he actually won a lip trick contest in May '88, which is when I was a couple of days old. But he's known for a lot more than that. He invented a ton of tricks. His site actually gives him credit for the chafe slide, which is what we call a tail slide, the G pivot, which is a no grab nose pick, and also the nose bone frontside grind, which we would call a salad. He posted this video on Instagram, and he said that it took place in 1986. On his website, it says 87 to 88, which is the exact same timeline that Eric Dressen's is. When asked if he invented it on Facebook, this is what he said. "I would often do frontside pivots pointing the nose over the deck like that. Then on this day at Fallbrook, when they were filming, I thought, maybe I'll just try grinding like that also. And these ones they caught on film were my first ones." So yes. So we've got his first ever ones on camera here. We have a location where they were, and we have deck graphics to try to come up with a timeline. So who was actually first? Let's start with Dressen. In these two pictures, he is skating his pro model, and I think he is in the third one as well, but it's so covered in stickers that it's kind of hard to tell. But when did his board come out? The first ad I found for it was in July 1987 as a line drawing, but it shows up in ads all the way through 89. But what about that picture, the one with the caption salad grind? It was definitely in a Thrasher because the name is attributed to Kevin Thatcher, who was the editor of Thrasher. But I looked through every single issue between January 87 and December 89, not counting June 88 because that one's just not online. I read through every single one of them and I could not find it. I don't know where it could possibly be, unless it's in that one that's not there, or if it was in a calendar or like a supplemental issue or a catalog or something like that. But I just cannot find any trace of where that picture was first published. The one that's online, apparently the picture was republished in a Thrasher book. So finding the original issue that it came in, I just cannot find it. So we have a span for him of 87 when his board came out to 89, which is when it was on footage. Normally he will say 88 when he's talking about it. I watched him tell the story a bunch of times. He normally says 1988. But what about Schroeder? Well, let's do some investigation. Is it possible that this clip was filmed on the Fallbrook ramp in 1986? Well, I searched for the history of that ramp and I found an article called The Fearless Flyers of Fallbrook from the Los Angeles Times in 1990. And the story essentially is, at the time, vert ramps were not super popular. They were being taken down at skate parks and things like that. So there was just this one ramp at someone's house that got very popular. All the big name pros were there. Tony Hawk, Danny Way, all the names that you can think of were skating on this ramp. And notice this quote from the article. The ramp was at the home of a kid who had a rich father and built the ramp. It was the best ramp in the area. All the pros started going there in 87, and Fallbrook became skate central for San Diego, says Alex Schroeder, managing editor of Power Edge, a skateboard magazine based in Carson, California. Alec is one of Ben's brothers, and it really looks like 86 is unlikely. All the pros were going there in 87. Grant Britton also talks about it being a big popular spot in 88. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, because just because all the pros were going there in 87 doesn't mean no one was going there in 86. I don't know when it was built per se, but it seems a little less likely. The only other bit of evidence that we have is the graphic that Schroeder is skating here in this clip. It's a blurry video. It's very hard to make out, but I went through all of the boards that I could find from any sponsor he could have had or any of the big brands at the time. And the first match that I found is the Ben Schroeder Pro model, which makes a lot of sense. It looks very similar to the board he is skating here, and it supposedly came out in 1988. But that is actually a little bit harder to nail down than you might think. According to Ben Schroeder himself, he turned pro in 87 and his first board came out in 88. I would believe that those are dates that would stick in his mind. It seems very likely that it came out then. And the site Art of Skateboarding, which is about old decks and how to collect them and how much they're worth and all that type of stuff, that has it listed also with a date of 1988. The weird thing is that in all those Thrashers that I read, the first time I saw the board was in September 1989 in an article talking about it, and here's what it says. My complete setup is the Dogtown Ben Schroeder with Venture trucks and 95A Spitfire 2 wheels. As I stated before, the Dogtown line is going through changes. The new Big Ben is at the crest of that wave in that it features a fat nose and a wide tail that makes revert tricks and backward riding easier without loss of foot placement or maneuverability. One of Schroeder's nicknames was Big Ben. I think he was about 6'6", and his board has the Big Ben clock in the graphic. I found it weird that it says the new Big Ben though, because does that mean that the board is new, or does it mean that it's the new version? It wasn't very uncommon for boards to be put out in different sizes. Even Eric Dressen had his board out in 2 sizes at the same time. It's also weird that even after it is shown off this is not an ad, this is just a feature in Thrasher, even after this, it still doesn't show up in the Dogtown ads. So it not being in the ads before doesn't mean it didn't exist. They might have only been showing it in Transworld or, Power Edge or something else. Maybe it was just at shops and they put up a poster. They might not have been putting it in ads. So it's not definitive that there were no ads from before that time. So that one is kind of a tough call. To me, there's one thing that's for sure, and it's that they both co-invented the trick. I don't think one saw the other and then stole it. They both had a lot of respect in skateboarding at the time. They were big names. They had invented other tricks and were known for other things. It seems very unlikely that they would try to steal this one relatively small trick. I just don't see that being the case. As for Dressen, I'm going to put his in 88. We have footage from the next year, but he recorded it after he took the picture, and he took the picture after getting good at it, after messing around with it. It just pushes it further and further back, and I would say definitely in 88, maybe even late 87 is possible, but that is a bit of a guess there. As for Schroeder, I'm also going to put his at 88, and the reason why is because it must have been before Speed Freaks. He says for sure that it was before Speed Freaks came out, and I believe that because he would have seen it. Everyone saw that when it came out. He wouldn't have seen a trick on his TV and then claimed to create it the next weekend. I just don't see that being possible. And I believe his board did come out in 1988 because he turned pro the year before that. His timeline also works out. To me, if it's my gut feeling, I'm going to say Dressen was most likely first. It is not definitive, but his timeline just tends to skew a little bit further back. But again, this is skateboarders in the US who had access to professional camera gear. You know, did someone in Japan or Brazil or England invent the trick 5 years before that? These are the kind of things we just can't know. But as far as what we can prove, I believe that Dressen was most likely first. And if you enjoy deep dives into skateboarding topics and the science of how skateboarding works and stories of skateboarding's history, here are some more for you to check out, and I will see you over there. Thanks for hanging out.